Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I bid you first of all, for them, as we haven't seen, a very happy new year, and a warm welcome to this meeting of the Planning Communities EAP, held today on the 17th of January 2024. Before we move to the agenda of the meeting, I think it's right to pay tribute to Councillor Michael Tebbit, who has sadly died over the Christmas period. Michael was a good friend of mine. He sat on the North Northamptonshire Joint Planning Committee for many, many years and was chair of that body for at least once. He was a Kettering Borough Councillor of great distinction and note, and he was a great expert in all aspects of planning and planning policy, a staunch advocate of Desborough and his area, and a very good friend and a very good servant for the people of all of North Northamptonshire. Michael also served as my assistant cabinet member until his health precluded it, and his knowledge and experience and wisdom was absolutely crucial to everything that we were trying to do in growth and regeneration. So it's terribly sad, and if we may, can we just stand up for a moment's silence? Okay, well, I do appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. So, on a lighter note, let's move to the agenda for today's meeting. Firstly, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Robin Carter and Anne Lee, and Councillor Kelly Watts is attending as substitute for Councillor Lee, and Councillor Ken Harrington has sent apologies for his possible late arrival.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor Watts. It's nice to see you. Councillor North, please.
Yeah, Councillor Deering as well, Chair. He didn't have time to sort an apology. It was a late apology. Okay.
All right, thank you. That's noted. Right. So, one of the dangerous things, Councillor Watts, on these meetings is you have a very wafer-thin agenda and you think this is brilliant, we'll be done in 10 minutes. Never. It can take 4 hours to get through some of this stuff. Oh, yeah, it's always good, isn't it? Anyway, the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of November should be with you. Ken, good morning and welcome. Your apology for being a teeny bit late has just literally been noted, but you're not, so I think we can almost delete that. Just let you settle down. Okay, we've just literally got to the minutes of the previous meeting, and you will remember that was quite an interesting meeting with some a quite robust discussion on the proposed Kettering Energy Park draft master plan. So are there any comments as to the accuracy of these minutes? And if, yep, can I sign them as true? Yep.
Chair,
Yep.
I've got a point.
Certainly.
It's at the point that talks about during discussion at bullet 2, and it refers, yes, 2, and it refers to 78% of B8, and the true figure was 70%
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
towards
well
B8,
spotted.
so.
Can that just be amended down to 70? That'd be great. Okay, any other thoughts or comments on these minutes as to their accuracy? No? Okay, in that case I can sign them as a true record. Which I will duly do. Thanks, Louise. And it's the 17th. Haven't got the right year. Thanks. Okay. Well, as we were discussing, a nice wafer-thin agenda, but that doesn't mean a thing for timings. First, on this one, I'd like to welcome Mark Chant, who is our service manager for Minerals and Waste Planning. Now, Minerals and Waste is an interesting beast because it is separated from the overall local plan and is, of course, of considerable importance, both in terms of its own structural importance in its industry, but also in effects that it can have in the local area and on the highways network. So it's extremely interesting to have this briefing, and I think we'll all learn a lot. So Mark, many welcomes. We're very much looking forward to what you've got to say, and looking forward to a lively discussion. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and nice to be here this morning. Just to say, I've been involved in minerals and waste local plan work for over 20 years in the Northamptonshire area, taking on the development control role about 15 years ago. So, been around and seen a lot of the issues that come forward in relation to minerals and waste. The service is a county-wide one. We're an NCC service, but we also provide service to West Northants under an inter-authority agreement. Therefore, all the work that's been done to date, all the local plan work, has been on a county-wide basis, but there are differences between the two sides of the county. In relation to this morning, I'm going to do a quick briefing which is around the issues of whether or not the local plan as it moves forward and is reviewed should be on a county-wide basis or split in half. Sets out some detail around the very broad costs and the matters and complexities that arise from the government's proposed changes to the development plan system, and I conclude with an indicative timeline for progression of the work. Just to state, there is a statutory requirement on the minerals and waste planning authorities to review their adopted planning policies for minerals and waste. And I think at this stage I'll just mention that Northamptonshire is a minerals and waste planning authority in its own right, and consequently the planning authority role is split. You have the district planning role, which is still called district planning role, even though it's a unitary authority, and then you have the minerals and waste planning authority role, and we have to report our performance figures separately to central government. So it is actually sort of quite a firm split, even though you work together and you're in the same unitary authority. And that applies also in West Northamptonshire too. In relation to the current Northamptonshire-wide local plan, which was adopted in 2017, we've not undertaken any detailed assessment of policies in relation to whether or not they're up to date. But very much the broad strategy and development management policies are broadly in line. They're still robust for the role they need to do. The big question is whether or not they should be changed at the next review. There is a need for some updating around net zero, climate emergency matters, and also in relation just a general update in relation to what the National Planning Policy Framework now says, which is you've moved on sort of 8 years from when the plan was last reviewed. In relation to the first point, should any review be Northamptonshire wide or split into two? Although minerals and waste planning was established through the blueprint, local government blueprint, as a service hosted by NCC, I need to emphasise that doesn't dictate that the minerals and waste planning policies should continue to be done on a county-wide basis. There is the option to go your own separate way. And also it means that the decision on moving forward, should that be a county-wide approach, that would also need to be agreed with West Northamptonshire. By splitting the policies, you could reflect that both halves of the county are not necessarily the same, and it would also enable policies to be progressed at the pace wanted by the two authorities. Bit of background about minerals provision, and in many ways that's a key element of any sort of plan review, is that it's based around local circumstances and recent trends, but the big driver is 10 years sales. And in relation to provision in the plan, provision is split by two. That one is crushed rock and the other one is sand and gravel. And sand and gravel is predominantly found in river valleys, but crushed rock is within Northamptonshire, very much focused on the North Northamptonshire area. And really the key element of any minerals plan review is what the provision figures will be for sand and gravel and for crushed rock. And it's those, and central government advice at the moment and for the last 15 years, largely 15 years, has been it should be based on 10 years sales. Now that obviously has an implication because historically North Northamptonshire element of the county has provided far more mineral extraction sites. And that's not just crushed rock, which is where, because it almost all lies within North Northamptonshire. It's also because the focus of sand and gravel provision has always been the River Nene. So that sort of sets the sort of context for where you are in relation to that is sort of the big moving forward of sort of policy and provision. It also means that because of the way the North has provided so much of the county-wide provision, not just in the last 10 years but previously, there would still be a need when you reviewed the plan to find new allocations. A large chunk of the mineral allocations in the current local plan have worked their way through. In West Northamptonshire, there wouldn't be a need to find so many, because if you were to sort of split the provision, you would have to work on the basis of what the North has previously provided and what the West has previously provided, and they may get away with minimal new allocations. However, I should say that at the moment, interesting enough, there's more activity going on in the West than there is in the North. I don't really know why that is, but at the moment we're getting more planning applications in the West than the North. In relation to progressing separate plans and policies, there's also some issues in establishing an evidence base, because all the evidence and all data sets, particularly from the Environment Agency, who are very important in relation to waste management matters, they're all on county-wide at the moment. So it would take a while to sort of work through and split those figures up. In relation to taking forward a joint plan, there would obviously be economies of scale by doing that. There'd be no requirement to double up on everything if you did go your own separate way, but you'd still need to have sort of splits in certain areas, such as consultations, such as ensuring the evidence base was very much focused on the planning being progressed. And the most costs would come at the very late stages of the plan, after you've submitted it for its independent examination, because both plans then would need to have that separate examination under separate independent inspectors. And independent inspector costs are quite high and actually a reasonable chunk of any sort of plan preparation costs. And also just to say that undertaking any review on a county-wide basis for the next plan doesn't preclude a split up at a later date, particularly when you've got a bit more of a history of having split data sets for the two halves of the county. In relation to the costs of the plan preparation, we've had for a number of years budget targets to meet, income targets to meet, and part of the way we've dealt with that has been through having contracts with other councils. That's doing other councils' local plans for them, and that brings in some income and also brings in sort of experience for staff, so that they always know, what they need to do in relation to sort of plan preparation, because they've been doing that for other authorities as well as for Northamptonshire. Because of that, I believe the staff that we still have are sufficiently experienced that we will not need any external consultants to come in to provide any advice. And by that I mean, tendering for external sort of well-known consultancy firms to do any work for that. That would not be needed. But although you save some money by not doing that, there will be some sort of cost, because if we're to concentrate on one or two plans, the team would need to undertake no other external work or minimal external work. So that means that the income that comes in would be reduced. And there would also be, once you get to the submission of the plan, then you get the examination costs kick in, and there's no way to avoid those, and that would be the cost of the inspector, the cost of the programme officer, and venue hire, and any legal advice. Although saying that, the legal advice we've utilised in the past when we were at the county council taking the plan through, that was pretty minimal. It wasn't a large element of costs. So my view would be the cost of taking the plan forward would be around 60,000 for an additional staff resource, or due to the reduction in income targets each year. Costs would extend into the examination year, and in addition, examination costs would include the inspector, which would be about £120,000, and some small legal programme office and venue costs, which would probably be around 30,000. So additional costs would be about 270,000 for the whole plan preparation process, and therefore that's a split figure if you were doing a Northamptonshire-wide plan. So that'd be a contribution of about 140,000 for around a 3-year period for Northamptonshire Council. If you were to split the plans into two, costs would be higher and would relate to additional costs for separate consultations and engagement, but also for separate examination and inspector costs. And just to say that there's no budget currently identified for costs associated with preparing a new plan, be it county-wide or in two. One thing that we're grappling with is the proposed changes to the development plan system, because the government's regulations aren't known, and we won't know them until later in the year. And the big issue here is that if you don't know what they are, you don't know how much you can actually sort of move forward with a plan if you don't know what the transitional arrangements will be. Transitional arrangements may be nice and straightforward in so much as the work you've done under an old system can just count towards the new system, or it might be that the transitional arrangements are such that you've almost got to start again. And I think this is a major uncertainty, but of course we're not unusual in this. This is affecting local planning authorities and minerals planning authorities across the country. But if you do start it, there's got to be an element of sort of treading carefully with making progress in advance of understanding detailed requirements to ensure that, as far as possible, you don't have to repeat any stages. Just to sort of touch upon the key proposals of what is expected to change, is that the plans will be concise and more focused on locally important matters, and as part of that there will be a new suite of national development management policies. Now again, we don't know what they are, what sort of areas they will cover, and if it's minerals and waste, how detailed those minerals and waste development control policies will be. So because we don't know that, we don't know exactly how much sort of development management type stuff we could put into the plan. In relation to the preparation, examination, adoption process, plans have to, it says that plans have to be in place within a 30-month time frame, which is extremely challenging. We, in the past, have managed to get a plan from start to submission in 2 years, but that's with very good headwinds. And you're working on a new system as well, so you're not really certain what some of the drawbacks could be. So at the moment we're not certain from the minerals and waste perspective how simple it would be to get the plan to submission in the sort of time period that government seem to be suggesting. The new preparation processes are supposed to be supported by clearer and more streamlined and proportionate evidence expectations to reduce the burden on planning authorities. And I think just to say the evidence base that we've used up to now in the plans that we've prepared for Northamptonshire has not been excessive. We've basically gone for the key elements only, such as waste needs, site assessment, sustainability appraisal, aggregates provision requirements, and this has proven through the examinations that we've had to be perfectly satisfactory. So we wouldn't under any circumstance really think that more detailed evidence base is needed. But likewise, we don't think the evidence base can be shrunk much further, even though the government is suggesting it could be. I think in saying that, I think they've got their eyes more on district local plans and on minerals and waste plans. There was also plans to reform strategic environmental assessments, but we don't, as a Minerals and Waste Planning Service, they expect it will lighten the current approach to SEA within Minerals and Waste Plans. And finally, we do have a supplementary planning document, and that will either have to be in some ways incorporated into the new local plan or lost altogether as part of the system, but we don't see that there's any particular issue in that. So I'm moving forward, despite not knowing some of these matters, there are a number of stages that will now need to be sort of discussed and firmed up and agreed, of which a key one is a confirmation from both NNC and WNC over whether they would either be supportive or not supportive of a draft of a joint plan across the county. Confirmation from central government over the detailed introduction of the system and what the transitional arrangements will be. Agreement from both NNC and WNC what the detailed plan preparation timetable will be, if it's a cross-county plan or if it's to be two separate plans, what the timetables for the two respective plans will be so that the joint staff resource can be optimised. To commence work, again on both sides of the county, on agreeing the additional costs that will be required and the mechanisms to agree this. And then finally actually starting work on the plan, which will be primarily the site's identification, including issuing a call for sites, an update of the waste needs assessments so that we can put in the plan what type of waste management facilities and disposal facilities will still be required, an analysis of minerals provision required, that's for both sand and gravel and for crushed rock, and assessing strategies that could be utilised and the development management policies for consideration, depending again on what the government sets out in relation to how much development management policies local plans can include. So I think that's all I think probably need to say at the moment. Just to say that the changes to the development plan system aren't helping us in moving forward at the moment, but we do believe we can commence some of the work. And in relation to the big question of cross-county or split the plan into two, there are, I think, enough benefits through optimising staff and other resources for the county-wide option to be the preferred way forward if both the North and West Northamptonshire councils agree. But I'm now perfectly happy to take any questions.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for a very clear run-through. And of course, it is interesting to see that your area is agonising about where we are with future changes to national planning policy, as we are with the wider local plan review, and how on earth every authority in the land is going to have to produce their plans within 30 months. It's going to cause some traffic jams in Bristol, is all I can say. But no, they're very interesting, and certainly you do give us quite a lot of food for thought. And it's welcome that you're doing or proposing to carry on the work on preparing your evidence base for what plan is decided upon, and taking into account any changes to planning policy that may come either with whichever with government, whether or not that changes within a year, which is yet another uncertainty. And moving that forward, then we have some choices to make to finance the minerals and waste plan. And I notice there's no budget for the costs associated with the new plan, whether it's one plan or two. So that is obviously something that we need to take under consideration. So there's a lot to think about, and obviously I see the recommendation about moving forward with a county-wide plan, which may have, well, certainly would have economies of scale in terms of inspection hearings. So, yeah, there's a lot of food for thought in that, and thank you for a very clear run-through. And, ladies and gentlemen, any comments or questions? Councillor North by a nose, but I haven't forgotten you.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One's probably quite straightforward. The other one, I think, would be more complicated, and I certainly would seek some guidance. Obviously, certainly supporting you, Chair, but depending on the answer, I would certainly have reservations about a county-wide plan. But we'll come to that, as I said, depending on the answer. The first point, Chair, of course, is obviously we've got a lot build out, and a lot of they haven't been delivered, and lots of plans in relation to house building. So I think the first obvious question is ongoing capacity to manage all that across the county in relation to the number of outstanding permissions going forward for the next plan period, because that must be quite a lot in relation to house building, even though it's obviously slowed down. The other serious point, Chair, is that there was a real lack of information about waste in this plan, and it is the Minerals and Waste Plan. And as you're aware, I have a huge amount of time and experience on waste, and there's a huge amount of deliberations and things that I don't think we've discussed as North Northamptonshire Chair on the way forward in relation to waste, in relation to treatment and disposal, which are both in this plan. And as I said, yes, we're there to aid and support you in your role, but personally I would have serious issues in relation to staying county-wide on the waste plan. Minerals I don't have such a much of an issue with, so maybe some comments on that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And you certainly do raise a good point, because waste was passed over very lightly in this report. And the plan that we do have is 2017 county-wide. And of course, that is a long time ago. And in that period, there has been a considerable increase in housing and indeed some employment land. I don't know, Mark, if you want to touch on waste particularly.
And I'll just start as well to make a reference to the house building issue, and as it relates to minerals. There isn't a direct correlation between house building in an area and minerals provision. And I suppose perhaps the best illustration of that is that if you go back to the years 2000 to 2008, house building shot up in Northamptonshire as a whole, but in relation to mineral demands in the county and mineral sites coming forward, it went that way, it went down. And a lot of the issues around that is how the minerals industry now, you're very much sort of reliant on the industry, and a lot of the big players now no longer see Northamptonshire as a plum area. They did when it was dead easy to extract sites from the Nene, and which they did so, particularly between Northampton and Wellingborough. But a lot of the easy pickings have very much gone. So you're left now with the either local or the sort of medium-sized sort of regional operators, the likes of Mick George, to come forward with sites, and a lot of those. And a lot of those sites, you know, they see as much use in those sites coming forward for the disposal of inert waste as digging up aggregates. So whatever house building is planned for the county in relation to minerals, there's not that direct correlation. It's sales that's the big thing. In relation to waste, you have to do a waste needs assessment, and that's something which is very seriously looked at by the inspector at the examination. And as part of the assessment, you do need to factor in, you know, growth of new housing and growth of commercial facilities as well. The plan also has to pick up municipal waste, and that's actually the most straightforward part of the plan, because you always get very good figures from the council's waste, from the council as the waste disposal authority. So in relation to waste, you do end up with an assessment, you know, that says what you need to provide. Now, there's always an issue between what that says, you know, even when an inspector agrees it and has gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, and what the situation is on the ground, because it's often doesn't link that well. For the last few times, we've identified a need for additional waste disposal sites, and this is general waste disposal, you know, not the sort of, you know, inert waste disposal within Northamptonshire as a whole. But we know that no one's ever going to come forward with that because of the way the market is changing. Now, because, you know, there is actually, the demand does seem to be less than what the assessments always provide, and the industry is focusing more and more on large regional sites, and none of those are in Northamptonshire. And I think that's one of the things that we've got to look at quite closely when we do the plan, which is, you know, how much do we put in what we feel, you know, on the basis of our expertise, you know, is actually real world figures, as opposed to figures that you get by doing the calculations in the way that you're supposed to do the calculations. And if you do that, can you get it through the planning inspector at the examination?
Okay, well, thank you, Mark. You wanted to come back, Steve?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. I mean, I appreciate it. You know, a lot depends on the waste assessment. I think my issue, Chair, is, as I said, as a council, we haven't decided on the strategy on the way forward in relation to waste disposal. And of course, you know, within the plan, you know, the facilities, you know, and how it's managed are actually in the plan. And I think my point from earlier is, Chair, that I know we looked at, certainly on the waste partnership, is that county-wide isn't always best, because obviously the transferring of waste across the county, and I'm sure you appreciate that it's certainly been looked at from this side, And I'm not obviously just talking about East Northamptonshire at the time, we were talking obviously Corby and Kettering as well, that actually, in relation to the waste transfer disposal, obviously looking to the east, and as just been said, regional might be a better option. So I suppose my point, Chair, is how much is included, and I appreciate the assessments has to be done, but agreeing on the county-wide plan, Chair, it's just how much is agreed on the way forward in relation to what we deal and how we deal with waste within the plan, I suppose, at the end of the day. I suppose what I'm saying is, what leads the strategy on waste? Is it this document, or as a council can we still decide on waste? And I appreciate this is planning, EAP. I suppose it just matters, we haven't tied all that up yet. And I'll just check in, Chair, that if we do decide to support the conclusion on a county-wide waste and mineral strategy, where that leaves us in relation to strategising about how we deal and what we want to do about waste. And as I said earlier, I don't necessarily think county disposal of waste is necessarily the only way forward.
No, I mean, you're quite right, and I think Mark picked up on that. I mean, that a lot of waste disposal is in large regional sites. So, we're sitting here in Corby. We might well be utilising a regional site in Leicestershire, say, or Cambridgeshire. So there does have to be that regional approach in whatever way the waste element of the plan is calculated, whether it be on a county-wide basis or whether it be on a authority basis. But I don't know if you want to consider regionality, and indeed maybe I don't know. Can you split a minerals and waste plan? I suppose you could, but that would just make for additional inspection costs.
Yes, it would. There are more costs, but there's nothing to stop you in legislation, under current legislation, and also in the proposed legislation, to split your plan up into a separate waste plan and a separate minerals plan.
I mean, it's interesting because you will remember, Councillor North, that we were all nice little district and borough councils, and then we decided to get together as North Northamptonshire long ago, way back when, and have a joint planning committee and produce a joint core strategy, which we successfully did. So there is precedent for combined working. And I'm just interested because, of course, local government boundaries are very sacrosanct. But I'm I'm interested in the possibilities of combining a plan, maybe with other authorities outside the ceremonial county of Northamptonshire, and just wonder about whether that is an option worth exploring.
Yeah, I very much feel that is a potential way forward, and that's because I think, well, partly one is sort of staff resource side of things, where there's a national shortage of planners, but the national shortage of minerals and waste planners is even more of an issue. The way minerals has been, and this is me first of all talking about minerals, the way minerals has been progressed over a number of years, and this is from the very early 70s, I think, from the Heath government, it is on a sort of regional basis, and you have regional bodies, and those regional bodies still exist even now, which is a sort of grouping of the industry and minerals and waste planning authorities to discuss some of the issues, and in the past to actually agree apportionments between minerals and waste planning authorities. At the moment, that is not occurring because the government guidance at present is very strong on this 10-year sort of sales provision as the driver, as opposed to a calculation having been done and then and then that's done on a regional basis, and then that's split into county-wide sort of units. But the question is whether or not some of those regional units are still quite right, and whether or not you would actually sort of benefit from being specialist at a level higher than county-wide, but sort of lower than the current, regional working parties. We remain in the East Midlands, so we have Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire coming to the meeting, and they have very, very different minerals issues to us down here. They're huge providers, national providers of crushed rock, particularly the areas around the Peak Park, whereas our issues are probably a bit more similar, particularly around issues of bringing forward sand and gravel sites, particularly sort of areas to the south such as Milton Keynes and the Bedfordshire unitaries. So you could actually see in the medium term that moving forward, possibly as a sort of even a joint planning unit or a joint plan that could pick up Bedfordshire and Milton Keynes and possibly beyond there, and then you've got the specialists, and you've got the sort of in some ways the similarities of the resource in the ground, which is sort of which is different to the north of the East Midlands. In relation to waste, I don't think there are shortages of waste planners, but the sort of link between minerals as a policy element and then minerals as a development control element is actually sort of quite strong, and the specialist knowledge you need to be a minerals development management officer is totally different to that you need to be a development management officer dealing with housing and commercial. Waste development is in some ways a sort of a bit of a mix. It's a lot of the expertise you need to deal with waste as a development control subject is pretty similar to some commercial development and the like. It's not quite so totally separate as minerals is. So you could actually, like they've done in North Wales, seven minerals and waste planning authorities have come together for minerals to move forward, and that's been working successfully for over 10 years. But no one's really done that in a sort of a waste manner.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks very much. Just picking up on that waste conversation, Councillor North. So, I think, as you say, this is the planning EAP, but I can see the link across, so I'll link across quickly and then come back. So, in terms of waste, we are at the stage now where we're about to go out and procure for a new waste disposal contract, because the contracts at the moment were county contracts, which we've inherited. They come to an end in 2025. So we need to find new arrangements, which we are doing, and we're just about to go out to procurement. So therefore, the authority will have a new waste disposal contract for, say, the next 10 to 20 years, potentially. So, if the authority wants to look at, as you're suggesting, as clearly has been looked at in the past through the former North Northamptonshire Waste Partnership, if the authority wanted to look at having its own treatment facilities, or indeed a part share of a treatment facility, or various different other options there, they have the time through the duration of the next contract to look at that and make those plans. I don't think, obviously, if they decided to develop something within the boundary of North Northamptonshire, there would have to be an appropriate site allocated through the minerals and waste plan. And then the local authority would then obviously develop a plan and make a submission to the planning authority to see whether or not it comes forward. So I think we've got time, as it were. I don't think we would preclude ourselves from any option by progressing with either of the options that Mark's put forward. I also don't think that I can't see, from a waste point of view, any benefit of having a minerals and waste strategy for the north rather than a minerals and waste strategy for the county, because ultimately, whether it's a single plan for the north or a single plan for the whole county, it will allocate sites. And ultimately, if we're looking to build an energy from waste facility or a MRF or whatever else, we will need a site. And it'll either be allocated in a county-wide plan or it'll be allocated in a North Northamptonshire plan. So actually it doesn't matter whether it's a county one or a North Northampton one from a waste perspective. So I hope that helps. I don't think it precludes us from choosing a different option in the future should we want to get involved in directly managing or owning a waste facility.
And of course, from a minerals perspective, there's a thing called geology, which will also choose sites to some extent. And it's a very good point that Mark made, that, we're in the East Midlands to be sure, but our geology is very, very different to Derbyshire or parts of Nottinghamshire, and, that's just a fact of life. So, okay, well, thank you for that. Councillor Harrington, you've been more than patient. Press it.
Oh, don't worry. I'll use this one. Thank you, Johnny. No, an item of clarification more than anything, I think. On the implications, including financial implications, would it be the same inspectorate that would draw the plans up for the north and the west, or would it be separate? Because if it was an inspector drawing up the plan for the north, a separate one drawing up the plans for the west, I would have thought it would take less than 3 years, not more than 3 years.
Well, the inspector doesn't draw anything up, but he opines on the plan that you have drawn up, and,
yes.
And or he or she, and suggests the soundness of that plan. So all the evidence is put in. There is an examination in which various stakeholders can make their cases, and then the inspector retires to consider their verdict and says that the plan is sound, subject, no doubt, to some modifications, or not sound. So they don't really play much of a role in drawing up plans, and they will make a conclusion on what is presented to them, whether it be a county-wide submission or a local one, and if that helps.
Yes, county-wide then it would be more cost-effective. Is that right?
You need
That's
the
what
one
I wanted to know,
examination.
really.
You'd need the one examination rather than having two separate ones. So
exactly.
You need one inspector and one program officer and one venue and one series of examinations. Because it's not just money. As a lot of colleagues here will know, these examinations take up a very considerable amount of officer time as well.
Yes.
So, there's a heck of a lot of preparation that's required. And then you actually have to have officers there all the time during the hearing to respond to queries and make the council's case and respond to other evidence that's brought by other stakeholders.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, so
add to that if that helps. I know that through taking our Part 2 local plans to examination, efforts were made to try to run examinations across the four authorities, either concurrently or back to back, because we saw there were benefits in efficiencies in using the same inspector. It happened, or it almost happened on one occasion, but it was difficult to make it operate. The inspectors would often move on to pick up another examination. The timing didn't work, that they were then able to move into a neighbouring authority examination. So it sounds good in principle, something that we could always aim for if we sought to go down that route, but it didn't always play out in the way that we wanted to, so we weren't able to make those efficiencies.
okay. Just a simple question. I notice, this is really for officers, I notice that there is no budget identified for the costs associated with a new plan. I wonder if anybody has any thoughts as to how we might get such a budget, because if we have to bring forward a new plan, we're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think, as Mark explained, a significant chunk of the cost attached to this would actually fall in the latter part of the work, because I suppose the majority of the cost sits around the cost of the examination, the inspector, the programme officer, and so on and so forth. So obviously that will give us time to start budget planning, because it won't, that, you know, those costs won't fall, for example, in 2024-25. They will be in subsequent years, so we can start to introduce those costs into the medium-term financial plan. I think most of the immediate cost will effectively, I suppose, be more indirect costs, because it will be the officer time attached to starting the process and the work. So I think we can probably find a way to cover any more immediate budget increases, but as I say, those large costs come a little bit later on, so we can program those in. Obviously, you know, it will still require us to go through the normal budget setting processes and to get the relevant approvals and so on and so forth. But that's the way in which I think that would work.
No, thanks. Thank you for that, Mr. Harbour. I mean, that's, I think, fairly clear. I was just a little bit alarmed, but no, I mean, it is, as you say, mostly some way down the road, and poor Mark will have to scurry and do a lot of the officer stuff himself and with his team. So that's good. Okay, Councillor Byrne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if I should know. Sorry, Kelly. Apologies if I should know, but if both West and North Northampton are in agreement, do we know where our colleagues in the West stand on this issue of a county-wide rather than separate?
Yeah. So through you, Chair, we have regular meetings with colleagues in the West, officer meetings, and so we've started some informal discussion. I speak to the Assistant Director of Planning there, and I think because from an officer perspective, we obviously both recognise that we really need to start gearing up to do the Minerals and Waste Local Plan review. She has had some informal discussion with, I think they have a slightly different setup there, but her portfolio holder and planning policy committee. So there's no formal decision, it's important to say, on this. But simply that issue around the principle of a county-wide plan or two separate plans. My understanding from those informal discussions are that the members she's spoken to are open to the idea of a county-wide plan, but obviously recognise the fact that it requires both North and West to agree to that before it could proceed. So there's been no formal sort of consultation with members, simply some informal discussion to date. So this arguably is I suppose, the start of a more formal discussion here today, with Mark's report and obviously in the EAP is a slightly more formal setting.
Right, well, thank you for that. Are there any other thoughts or comments? Okay, well, I think, yes, Councillor Wolf.
Oh, well, thanks, Chair. It's just after the general conversation of whether you'd look to have a take a view on to go regional on the minerals plan, because I think if you look, obviously with the changes coming through from government, and as mentioned, and 4.16, and you discussed, Chair, if there's a limited capacity across the country, because it's not obviously not part of the recommendations and conclusions, whether you take a look to do a regional plan and take that forward as an initial discussion, because the reasons I just said and as we discussed earlier, I'm not sure we should just necessarily keep minerals within the county, and certainly in relation to waste, that's not on a county-wide basis. And if we're out of time, it may be an opportunity that's obviously not part of the recommendations that we should, if you so wish, take forward.
Well, certainly regionality is something we could talk about, but obviously then there would have to be engagement with neighbouring authorities who might not be in the East Midlands. I mean, as I say, it would be a good idea to explore that option, both in terms of minerals, for the geological reasons that Mark quite clearly outlined, and perhaps, and I'm not an expert in it, but I know that Graham Kane is very much has a lot of expertise in waste disposal. And again, that seems to be a very regional thing. I don't know quite how we are served here in North Northamptonshire. But again, perhaps some regional discussions should be explored, and whether we could come to a conclusion where a minerals and waste plan could be put together with maybe West Northamptonshire and maybe other authorities too, is something we should explore for pros and for cons, and for the cooperation that would be required. We'll have a go. Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Steve, Councillor North. We're at that stage, aren't we, where... Sorry, Kelly. We're at that stage where there are so many ifs and buts, and we just don't know. So surely this is a good opportunity and good time to sort out the options that we may have, because we may well decide to go down a route, and our partners in crime may not. So this is a time, in my opinion. I'm guessing Steve agrees.
No, thank you. I mean, you're absolutely right. We are in a period of ifs, buts and maybes in terms of the development of planning policy, in terms of overall government, in terms of what we as an authority wish to do. So this is a period in which there are, as somebody once said, too many known unknowns. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It gives us a moment to reflect and see if we can be imaginative from this end as well. And so we will explore this, and we will see what comes of it. Okay, any other comments, thoughts? Right. Well, Mark, thank you very much. You've managed only lightly to stir up the hornet's nest today, but that is always very interesting. And we actually have had a really interesting discussion on a somewhat neglected, but on a aspect of planning policy which doesn't always get very much in the spotlight, and it is separate for good and sufficient reason to the local plan. And it is important that we try to get the best options for this authority and for what has to be done, both in terms of minerals and waste. So a very interesting discussion. So thank you for that. Okay, we now move to the last agenda item, which is going to be a relatively quick one, I suspect, which is the Executive Forward Plan, which you should all have. And as far as I see, there isn't anything that directly affects this EAP coming forward. No, all the way through until April. Obviously, that doesn't mean that material may not come forward. It's just not currently on the forward plan. But don't think that nothing is being done, because there is a lot of machinations going on, a lot of work going on with regard to the development of the overall strategic plan, which we will come on to when we finish the formal session. But are there any thoughts or comments on the executive forward plan? Okay, right. Well, in that case, we now move to the closure of the meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for their comments in this formal session. As I said, I think we had a really, as always with this EAP, I think we had a really interesting discussion on a highly technical area. Kelly, I hope you found the meeting useful, and I hope you enjoyed it yourself.
Could I just say, Chair, yes, I've not been to an EAP before, but it is a great opportunity to really dig into some, I mean, I've never even heard of minerals and sand and crushed rock and stuff, but I appreciate that, we need it to be building and doing all the things that we want to do in the county and beyond. So, yeah, it's really, really interesting, actually, and a very good, nice format to be in, to be able to discuss it.
No, well, thank you. And we do find this useful because this is a forum with which we can really drill into planning policy, which is so important, and it's a sort of area which is almost, it's almost mystical. Nobody who isn't in the loop of it really gets into under the skin of it. And, I go out and I speak to the executive at the Part 2 plan, and you can see eyes glazing over, because it is tremendously important, but it's a little bit of a dark art. So it's really good to see you here, to get some idea of the perspective with which we're working, because this basically sets out Northamptonshire and what we're doing here, all the way to 2040 and beyond. So it'll probably see many of us out. So, this is long-term thinking, so it's all good. But anyway, thanks so much for coming, and it's been a pleasure having you. But with that, I